welcome back to my channel. My name is Nichelle. Today we're doing Heir of Fire. This will most certainly be just part one because I have almost 300 slides. Last book we had like 230 maybe. This book we're like much closer to 300 than 200. There's a lot that happens in this book. This book is so good. This book is so good. In case you're wondering, I don't know if I've actually said it yet. This is our Heir of Fire recap. This is the fourth book in the Throne of Glass series by SarahJMaas. And this is, to me, where the series starts to get good. Not that the first two books were bad, but like they are books. You know, they are like average books. I think the first time I read them, I gave them like 3.5s and 4s, the first couple books. This book is a 5-star book. Every book after this is a 5-star book. And I reread this again and I said, yeah, especially the end. Especially the ending of this book is just everything. In fact, that's why I have so many slides, because essentially just like the last like 20 chapters, I have to tell you every detail that happens because I can't skip anything because it's all perfect and brilliant, masterful. Like honestly, listening to the audiobook of the last few chapters might be faster than whatever I'm about to tell you because I just like, I need to tell you everything. I'm obsessed with it. Anyway, enough of my blabbering. Let's jump into the slides. This is Heir of Fire by SarahJMaas. I have both covers here. I have the original green covers that I was just holding up a second ago, and then I also have the new covers, and these are some of my favorite new covers because on the cover we get a little baby hawk, a little hawk friend that we're going to meet in this book, and also under Heir of Fire you can see little baby Abraxos. And I, as you'll come to find out, truly like adore Abraxos. He's my favorite character. I love him so much, and we meet him in this book. Full spoilers for everything up until this point. I will not spoil future books, and I tend to go in the chronology of the book, so like I normally won't give away information that we haven't learned yet in the series. Like we're really following along with the series, so you are safe for the rest of the series, but I will be fully spoiling Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, and Assassin's Blade, because at this point you should have read Assassin's Blade, and if you haven't, you need to. You need to pause, take a breather, go read Assassin's Blade, come back. I know there's like one reading order that says you can read it after Heir of Fire. I do think that's incorrect. You're going to miss a lot in this book if you haven't read Assassin's Blade. Like there's a lot of fun little details. So I would read that before you read this one, if you haven't yet. Okay, great. Let's get started. First, let's check in with our main characters. So we're going to go through the main three, kind of what they're up to, who they are. We have Miss Aedion Ashryer, love of my life, the most beautiful, most powerful, most amazing girlie in all the Empire. Also known as Celaena Trains. I will actually alternate between calling her Celaena and Aedion, I'm sure, as I go through this, because she's kind of like inhabiting both people still. So Aedion is like her birth name. She was born the Princess of Terrasen and named Aedion Ashryer at that point. But then at 8 years old, her family was killed and she was found on a frozen river by Erebin, King of the Assassins, and he raised her in the Assassin's Keep as Celaena Trains. And that's who we knew her as in the first two books. But to kind of catch you up real quick, when Celaena was 17, the most wonderful, beautiful, amazing assassin in all of Rifthold, she was sent to prison at Endover and was there for a year, and then she was pulled out of prison by the Prince Dorian and his captain of the guard, Chaol Westfall. We'll talk about both of them. And she participated in the King's Champion competition. In that competition, she won. So now she's the King's Champion, which essentially means she's like his personal assassin. And she also goes by Alentia. Alentia is a name that Nehemia, her best friend from the last book who was killed, gave to her, and it means the spirit that could not be broken. She also like briefly had a situationship with Dorian, especially in Throne of Glass, but mostly had like a real relationship with Chaol. They like dated for most of Crown of Midnight, but pretty much ended things at the end of Crown of Midnight when he was connected to Nehemia's death. He was like very loosely connected, but the trust was broken between the two of them, and really it doesn't seem like it's going to be mending. There's a lot of hurt feelings. We don't totally know where they stand at this point, but it's not looking great. She's currently on a boat on her way to Wendlyn. She's on assignment to kill the royal family, and she's low-key not doing so well. She's like high-key mentally ill. Then we have Prince Dorian. He is the Crown Prince of Ardalan, first in line for the throne. He is a hopeless romantic and probably the most eligible man in the castle. SarahJMaas likes to like call him like a womanizer, like someone who's like just sleeping through everyone in the castle. That is not the Dorian we've seen. Dorian we've seen is like the sweetest little sweetheart angel. He raises puppies. It's like his #1 hobby, and he like falls hopelessly in love with every girl that he lays eyes on, and it's sweet. And we found out last book that he also has like magic ice powers, and that is incredibly dangerous because his father has like banned magic and has put some spell over the kingdom that prohibits magic from being used, except Dorian's magic is still working. So confusing. We don't know why it's still working, but also if the king were to find out that Dorian had magic powers, it probably wouldn't be great for him. He, like I said, had a little relationship with Celaena in Throne of Glass, but like honestly still has like a crush on her and is still like a little bit obsessed with her, which is like, you know, honestly, like it's hard not to be a little bit obsessed with Celaena Trains. And he's currently babysitting Celaena's dog Fleetfoot for her while she goes to Wendlyn. Then we have Mr. Chaol Westfall. He is the son of the Duke of Annel, and he hates his dad. That's a key characteristic here. He has lived in Rifthold, the capital city, since he was little. He left Annel, became captain of the Royal Guard, not when he was little, but recently. And he's best friends with Dorian. Like, this is core to his self. He has lived at the palace, like I said, since he was young, and then a few years back became captain of the Royal Guard, and this is like essentially like secret service for the king. I think he's like in charge of like literally just guarding like the palace, and he loves his job. He loves his job. And last book he was dating Celaena, really imagined a future with Celaena. Like he was like, we're gonna have a bunch of children together and like it's gonna be beautiful. I don't think that's gonna work out for him. Anyway, but he found out that Celaena was actually Fae during like a battle thing that happened last book, and so he hatched this plot to send her to Wendlyn so she could escape. She could run away because being Fae is incredibly dangerous, and he was worried for her safety. So he traded his own freedom, his ability to be at the palace, to his father, and says, okay, I'll go back with you to Annel, which he does not want to do, so Celaena can be free. Gorgeous, except Celaena didn't want to go. Celaena was like, Chaol, you're literally ruining everything. And he's like, what? He was a little confused. But essentially, he's on his way to Annel now because he did that, and he also found out at the very end of last book that Celaena and Aelin are the same person. He found out that Celaena is Aelin, the heir to Terrasen, and that is like a little bit troublesome to him, because if Aelin is like the queen of Terrasen, that is the biggest threat against the Empire, and therefore the biggest threat against Dorian, his bestie bro. Let's kind of catch up where everyone is. So we have up in the green circle up top, we have Terrasen. This is where Celaena is from, and it's where she is the kingdom of. And if we drop down to where both the boys are right now, around the blue circle, this is Rifthold, the capital city, which is where the last 2 books mostly took place, and where our boys are going to start out. This is where the palace is. Celaena's on a little boat headed to Wendlyn. Wendlyn is not actually on the map, but it's a series of islands, I believe, that are to the east, where the Fae live. So it's like Wendlyn, and within, or like next door to Wendlyn, is another place called Doranel, and Doranel is like home to the Fae. Wendlyn is just like a neighboring kingdom. Way at the bottom, in the south, we have Elwë, which is where Nehemia was from. It is the only main monarchy within the continent, essentially, but still has been like politically taken over by Ardalan, and like tensions are really high there. There's a lot of rebellion, political unrest there. And then the purple circle in the middle there, we have Moranth. This is where Duke Parrington, Roland Havillard, and Caltaine are currently located. We knew that they were headed there after the last book. They're up to some bad stuff, probably. It seems like it. Duke Parrington and Roland are bad news. And then lastly, but we have Annel. This is the red circle to the west. This is where Chaol is from and where he's headed. Heir of Ash, Part 1. We open with Celaena chilling on a roof in Wendlyn. She's drinking and vibing. And by vibing, I mean having a miserable time. She, like I said, is, after Nehemia's death, is really just like struggling. She's having like a really hard time. She was sent to Wendlyn to murder the royal family. Obviously, she's not going to murder the royal family. But like, she needs to figure out something, because if she returns back to Rifthold before she murders the royal family, the king is like, I'm going to murder Chaol and also the king and queen of Elwë, these people that she cares about. And so she has to come up with a plan to like figure out how to make sure that does not happen. And she's also decided that she wants to find Queen Maeve. So like I said, Doranel is the Fae city, and it is close to Wendlyn. I think it's on a close by island, and she's hoping to find Queen Maeve, because Queen Maeve will have more answers about the word keys. In last book, we learned about these word keys. There are 3 word keys, and they go inside the word gate. Okay? And if they go inside the word gate, they can open a portal between worlds. Bad news, the king has 2 of them, or 1 of them. We're not sure. He either has 1 or 2 of the word keys, and he wants to open this gate. He's a bad guy, so we don't want him to have that power. And she's just like vibing, and a hawk keeps flying around and bothering her. Rude. So anyway, she's up on this, and then she like happens to be looking around on these rooftops, and she happens to spot the Prince of Wendlyn, Aedion Ashryer, and they both are Ashrayers, so they have their magical Ashryer eyes, which are these like turquoise blue eyes with gold rings on them. And she's like so surprised by how much the people absolutely adore him. And she thinks about the fact that she was probably not the best person to assign to like free everyone. Like, she made an oath to Nehemia that she would make sure that her people were freed, and she's like, turns out like maybe Nehemia should have made this oath with like someone with real power. Like, it's clear that Aedion is a good guy, and he has like access to militaries and like access to like a kingdom, and she's just a girl. She's just an assassin. How is she supposed to do this? We get the kind of like sense from Celaena as she's going through this that she's also still kind of like really struggling over her feelings with Chaol. Chaol gifted her a ring like back in book 1, I think, and she keeps gambling it in the gambling dens, because that's what she's doing at nighttime, and then we'll get it back. She'll either win it back or she will go and like steal it back, but she like cannot let go of this ring and this connection back to Chaol. She's jumping down from the rooftops. I think she's looking for a snack, actually, if I recall, and she ends up in this alleyway with this Fey man. He's like very large, very intimidating, and she's like, ooh, this is maybe bad, and is kind of freaked out. But then she's like, actually, this could work out in my favor. Like, I wanted to go talk to Maeve, so maybe if I like this Fey man could set me up with like a combo with Maeve. And he starts sniffing her. One thing about this book is that the people be smelling each other. Like, smells are like a huge aspect of like how they gather information as Fae people. They like know a lot of stuff by sniffing you. And currently Celaena is very stinky because she hasn't taken a shower in a while. She's a smelly girly. But also she's a little bit worried that he's gonna be able to smell the fact that she's a queen and that she's an Ashryer. She is trying to like embody her like Celaena Sarthothian swagger. Celaena Sarthothian has a little swagger in her step. But the guy is not buying it. He's just like, let's go. And then Celaena out loud says to him, I've known a few brooding warrior types in my day, but I think you might be the broodiest of them all. And I think that is a gorgeous introduction to our bestie, Rowan Whitethorn. Rowan Whitethorn is a Fae guy. He has a big face tattoo. He's a blonde. And his face tattoo is in like the old Fae language, so it's like words, but Celaena can't read what they are. And we know that Rowan is one of Maeve's guard, which is like this group of elite warriors that are like first in line to Maeve. Like, they're the closest people to Maeve. So crazy that she would happen to bump into him. Obviously this guy was looking for her. Meanwhile, let's check back in and see what besties are up to at the palace. We've got Mr. Chaol. Chaol is having nightmares, and he keeps having these nightmares about when Celaena killed Archer. So Archer Finn was this rebel that was connected to Nehemia's death, and at the end of the last book, Celaena wound up killing Archer because of his connections to all of this, and also because he was like clearly just very power hungry and was not in the rebellion for the right reasons, and so she murdered him. Chaol was watching from like the back as she like gutted him. She like ripped down his intestines. It was pretty rude and pretty upsetting. And it was upsetting to Chaol because he's still having nightmares about it. But in his nightmares, the image of Archer Finn will then switch over to Dorian. As I will like continue to talk about, I like really love Chaol. I think Chaol is a great character. I think he is one of the most interesting characters in this novel. And he's also an anxious boy. Okay, Chaol is an anxious boy. And so the fact that he found out Celaena is actually Aelin, and he sent Aelin like straight into the arms of people who could be her allies, is stressing him out a little bit, because keeping Dorian safe is his like #1 priority. His loyalty is to the crown because of Dorian. And so when he sent Celaena to Wendlyn, this was a betrayal of kind of like that central loyalty, because he valued Celaena's life even more than its loyalty to the crown. But he didn't realize kind of exactly what he was doing. And like, we don't know if we can trust her. And by we, I mean Chaol is like a little bit worried. Anyway, Dorian is also mad at him from the last book. He is like so confused why Chaol sent Celaena away. And Chaol told Dorian that it was because she was dangerous, but like it was a lie. Anyway, the next morning they sit down and have a little chat at breakfast for the first time. And it's the first time they've talked in a few weeks because Dorian was so like upset with Chaol for sending Celaena away. And Chaol tells Dorian for the first time that he is going back to Anel with his father when his father leaves. And Dorian had heard rumors about this, but like did not realize that they would be true. And Dorian, like I said, is still really mad about Chaol sending Celaena away, but he's trying. He's like trying to mend things because, as he says, I'm fairly certain we are not enemies. Of course not. You guys are bestie bros, so you can't be enemies. Chaol has not shared anything he's learned about Celaena with Dorian, so he has not shared the fact that he has learned that Celaena is Aelin. He has not like shared anything about his plan. He's keeping everything very close to the chest. And he's really wrestling with himself in this future that he imagined with Celaena, with the reality of who she actually is and how she is both impossibly dangerous. Like, he's seen her at her most dangerous in Assassinland, but also like politically dangerous. And he's like really trying to grapple through this. It's showing up on his face. He's looking stressed. And Dorian is like, you look like you're about to be ill. You look like you're gonna vom at the breakfast table. And Chaol's about to like confess everything. He's like, I cannot bear this alone. When someone walks in and we meet a new character. This is Aedion Ashryer, Wolf of the North, and we're introduced to him as a man who looks every inch a warrior. He is like, I think he's like mid-20s, I think, maybe like 24ish, and he's got those classic Ashryer eyes just like Celaena, so they are turquoise with the gold ring, and he serves the king despite being like a prince in the Ashryer line. So he's actually Aelin's cousin, but he like is a loyal general to the king and has been for years. So Aedion is back. He's actually a month late. He was supposed to be back a month ago. And he's got like a bag of body parts that he collected from up north. Apparently the Ashryers just love bringing little bags of body parts as souvenirs, because Aelin did that last book as well. And Chaol is like, I am so glad Aelin isn't here to see what her cousin has become. Like, he has become this like tool of the Empire. And Aedion's wearing the king's black ring. And we know from the last book that these are connected to like the word stones in some way, and they allow the king to control the people that are wearing them. We don't totally know how this control works or how much control they have, but like clearly the king has some sort of magical control over Aedion as well. We also know that Aedion has a like really cool sword, and it's the sword of Orynth, which Orynth is the capital city of Charazed, and it is by rights Celaena's sword. Like, it should be passed to her as the throne was passed to her. So he's got her sword. Anyway, Aedion comes over and chats with the boys about what he's missed. He's mentioned that things are feeling a little tense between the boys. He's like, things are looking a little tense between the bestie bros. And he also mentions that he knows, he like heard that a witch got murdered. He was like, I heard that Baba Yellowlegs was murdered while she was here. Which, that's one of the best parts of the book. And then he's just like kind of like gossiping with them. And Aedion invites the boys to a party. He says, I'm going to be throwing a party later. You both can come if you want. And then he leaves. The boys are still chatting, and Chaol turns to Dorian and tells him that he does not want details about Dorian's magic powers. He says, I think the less I know, the safer it's going to be for you. The less people know about your magic, and the less people know about your magic, the safer you will be. And like, my priority is still keeping you protected. Like, that is my top priority. And Dorian asks, like, why did you really send her away? And Chaol says, I sent her to do what needs to be done, which is like super vague, but it's actually the same line that Queen Elena said when Celaena, it's very confusing, they all sound very similar, when Celaena was like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to go to Wendlyn, this seems like a problem, and Queen Elena was like, do what needs to be done. So like, something's happening there. Let's take a moment. Our girl is here, our Queenie McQueen Bob. The crowds go wild. This is Miss Manon Blackbeak. I love her so much. Welcome to the stage, Manon. I believe SarahJMaas's biggest flaw in writing these books was how she introduces the witches to us. Like, the witches plot seems so irrelevant. I remember the first time I read this book. Every time I got out to a witch chapter, I would be so upset because I didn't want to read about it. It seemed so disconnected from everything else that was going on. But let me tell you, if you are reading along, if you haven't read past Heir of Fire, and you were like, the witches are the worst, they're so boring, the way these girlies connect in with the rest of the story is truly chef's kiss. I love the way Manon's story goes and the way this like whole witch plotline develops. So like, trust in the witches and try your best to like enjoy your chapters with them. So we meet Manon Blackbeak. She's vibing at a house in a little village, and 3 dudes show up at her house. And she is a witch, and she's been doing little witchy things in this village, and she got some ulterior motives we'll talk about later. But these boys, she knows, are going to be up to no good. They're here to like pillage and then probably kill her, which is rude. not acceptable behavior. And so as soon as they arrive, she comes out and she shows off her iron teeth and iron claws. So iron teeth witches have iron teeth that like grow out of their gums. Like they have normal teeth and then they can go like a cat, I guess, with their claws, and they can like make their iron teeth come out. And they also have iron claws that are like similar vibe, I think. She comes out and shows off her iron teeth and her iron claws, and one of the men does pee his pants. She then reaches over and just pops his throat right out of his neck. She rips his throat out. And then she kills the other two. She kills all three boys. She says, okay, not appropriate behavior. Death to all of you. Her plan, the whole reason she was in this village, is she wanted to flush out the Crescent witches, which are like the nicer witches. They pose as healers in a lot of these areas, and essentially the Iron Teeth witches go out and kill them all the time. Back to what we've learned about witch lore in the past couple books. We learned about it in Assassin's Blade, and we learned about it again a little bit in Crown of Midnight. There are two main groups of witches, the Iron Teeth and the Crescent witches. The Iron Teeth witches are split up within clans. There's like clans within the Iron Teeth, we'll talk about later. But those are like kind of the main groups. And they had a big war like 500 years ago in the Western Waste, which is this area in the west of the continent. And the witches, the Crescent witches, cursed the land, so they're waste now. Like there's nothing there, nothing will grow. And then they like, all the witches like dispersed all over. And they're still like enemies. And so the Iron Teeth witches will hunt down the Crescent witches, and then when they kill them, they steal their cloaks. So that's why Manon has a red cloak, it's from the last Crescent witch she killed, which she's killed more than a few. So that's Manon, our introduction. We will come back to her, obviously. We will be revisiting Miss Manon frequently. Back at the palace, we have Dorian and Aedion going on a walk together at the gardens. Essentially, Dorian's dad was like, you're in charge of Aedion for the day, keep him entertained. And Dorian is trying to like get Aedion to do activities, and Aedion only wants to walk around in the gardens. And they wind up talking about the fact that Aedion is kind of leashed by the king in the fact that he tries to quell rebellions before they get too big in order to like make the least amount of violence happen. So he's putting down rebellions in order to save human life. And Dorian's like, interesting. And then as they're walking in the garden, they like turn the corner and the guards aren't watching them anymore. And Aedion does push Dorian over and sends him into a thorny rose bush where he cuts his hand open. Yeah, he was just like, I don't know, Aedion does not like the royal family. He has to pretend he likes them, but like when given the chance, he's gonna push the prince into the thorn bush. What are you gonna say about that? And so Dorian goes to the healer. He's going to the healer for his hands because he needs a couple stitches, and he asks the healer her name for like the first time. He's met this healer multiple times, never asked her name because I don't know, because she's a healer. She's lesser, I guess. Embarrassing Dorian. Her name is Sorscha, and she has healed all of them over the last books. We've seen her, but we didn't know her name. She was the one who had come and helped heal Fleetfoot and the boys during the last book after the like big demon battle in the tunnels. She's from Fen Harrow. She's always had a crush on the prince from the time she came to the palace, which she came to the palace after her parents were killed, and she is the daughter of two dead immigrants from a village in Fen Harrow that had been burned to ash, a village that no one would remember. But that didn't stop her from loving him as she did, invisible and secret, ever since she had laid eyes on him 6 years ago. So she's obsessed with Dorian, which like, okay, it's hard not to be. I know like I talk a big game. I think I was realizing this as I was like watching back my last video and like reading through some of the comments. I like spend a lot of time talking about how much I love Chaol, which I do. Do not get me wrong, I do love Chaol. But I also love Dorian. Like I love Dorian more than Chaol. I just feel like Dorian doesn't need a PR team. Like I'm Chaol's PR team, he needs PR. He needs some good PR. Dorian doesn't need me to defend him. Everyone who reads this book knows Dorian is a little gem of a man. Like Dorian is my favorite man, my favorite guy character in the whole Throne of Glass series. And like Sorscha can see that. Sorscha's like, this guy's a good guy. Also, like after she leaves, Dorian is realizing that she knows like all of their secrets. Like she knows the secrets and she hasn't said anything. And he's like really curious to learn a little bit more about that. Meanwhile, let's check back in with our girlies over in Wendlyn. So, Rowan and Celaena are riding horses through the mountains that border the Mortal Lands and Queen Maeve's lands. Rowan is literally ignoring her. He's like barely talking to her at all unless he like needs to speak to her. And Celaena is loving it. Celaena is like, I do not want to make friends, so this works for me. As they're traveling, Celaena notices that the little folk, which are the like little tiny fairies, the like Tinkerbell-esque fairies, are like watching them travel. Like they have their eyes on them, which we know that the little folk have kind of always been interested in Celaena. And they make camp at night and they never have a fire. They would never have a fire. Rowan says there's bad things in this woods and we do not need them to know where we are. They travel for like several days. I don't remember how long it is, but they pretty much ignore each other the entire time. And like I said, Celaena is fine with that. She's had enough of friends, enough of them dying too, it says. And they approach these big magical wards in a big stone castle with like a ton of guards. And Celaena is like, oh my gosh, I'm so good. I'm gonna wait out here. You can run and do what you need to do. I'll wait here. And then we can just keep going on to Queen Maeve's house, because that's where she assumes they're going. And then Rowan is like, let's go. We're going inside this place. Come on. And they head in. And Queen Maeve is waiting for them, and she greets them as soon as they enter. It wasn't carved oak furniture or the faded green drapes or the warmth of the fire that made her stop dead. It was the dark-haired woman seated behind the desk, Maeve, Queen of the Fae, her aunt. And then came the words she had been dreading for 10 years. Hello, Aelin Galathynius. So we have finally met Maeve. Maeve has waited for them in wherever this building is. Maeve's sister, Mab, is like the great-great-grandmother of the Ash River line. So she is like connected via Celaena's mom. And Celaena returns back this greeting and says, Aelin Galathynius is dead. And Maeve returns, let's not bother with lies. Okay. We both know she's not dead. She's standing right in front of me. And Celaena is like, it doesn't feel like a lie. It feels like Aelin died that night when her family was killed, when she was found on the river. Like, she is no longer Aelin, she is Celaena. And she tries to leave the room, but Rowan is like blocking the door. He's like, that's what he's doing. He's blocking the door. Just showing you what blocking the door looks like in case you're wondering. Maeve is like an intimidating lady, and she like continues talking because clearly like Celaena can't leave the room until we're done with this. And she is like, I'm so sorry I made you guys go so quick, but like it seems like Rowan could have stopped and let you take a little bath because you smell really bad. So that's kind of rude. She's immediately like, you stink. But and she also calls Rowan Prince Rowan, and so we learn that he is a prince from Mora's bloodline, which is another sister. I think we will go through this later. There's like a bunch of sisters that are like a long time ago. They lived to like a gajillion. So like, and so essentially Rowan and Aelin are very, very, very distant cousins. Why is this brought up? Sarah could have just not said this at all. I also feel like Aelin and Dorian are like maybe related too. I don't know. She could have just not mentioned that. But she did. She did decide to mention that. I don't know. I can't give you an answer to that one. He says to Celaena, I've been waiting a long, long while to meet you, and as I do not leave these lands, I could not see you, not with my eyes at least. The queen's long nails gleamed in the light. There were legends whispered over fires about the other skin Maeve wore. No one had lived to tell anything beyond shadows and claws and a darkness to devour your soul. Okay, promising. They broke my laws, you know. Your parents disobeyed my commands when they eloped. The bloodlines were too volatile to be mixed, but your mother promised to let me see you after you were born. Maeve cocked her head, eerily similar to the owl behind her. It would seem that in the 8 years after your birth, she was always too busy to uphold her vow. If her mother had broken a promise, if her mother had kept her from Maeve, it had been for a damned good reason. A reason that tickled at the edges of Celaena's mind. A blur of a memory. But now you are here, Maeve said, seeming to come closer without moving, and a grown woman. My eyes across the sea have brought me such strange, horrible stories of you, from your scars and steel. I wonder whether they are indeed true. Like the tales I heard over a year ago, that an assassin with Ash River eyes was spotted by the horned lord of the north in a wagon bound for... Enough. Celaena again glanced at Rowan, who was listening intently, as if this was the first time he was hearing of it. She didn't want him to know about Endover. Didn't want that pity. I know my own history. She flashed Rowan a glare that told him to mind his own business. He merely looked away, bored again. Typical immortal arrogance. Celaena faced Maeve, tucking her hands into her pockets. I'm an assassin, yes. And your other talents? Maeve's nostrils flared, scenting. Again, we love sniffing stuff in people. What has become of them? Like everyone else on my continent, I haven't been able to access them. Maeve's eyes twinkled, and Celaena knew that Maeve could smell the half-truth. You are not on your continent anymore, Maeve purred. Run. Every instinct roared with the word. Show me, Maeve whispered with a spider's smile. Run. Run. Okay. Gorgeous. So, like, the vibes are terrible. The vibes are scary with Maeve. Maeve is giving off, like, runaway vibes. And Celaena is thinking about the last time that she accessed her magic, which was in Crown of Midnights when she was down in those tunnels trying to fight off the demon monster, and she had so little control over her fire, and it so easily could have killed Chaol and Fleetfoot. And she's like, we're like in a house, we're not gonna be doing that. And she can also feel Maeve like testing, like a finger of shadow, like testing at the edges of her mind, like trying to break in. And she doesn't love that either. Then Maeve says to her, I know you have questions about the keys, so you can ask me in Dornell. And Celaena's like, okay, but you are literally sitting right in front of me right now, so why can't you answer my questions now? And Maeve's like, the answers will take time, and you haven't earned them yet. And Celaena's like, okay, what do I need to do to earn them? And Maeve says, I do not let half-breeds into Dornell, so I'm going to let Rowan train you to see what you will become and prove yourself worthy. Then maybe I'll tell you stuff. And Celaena says, to what end? Celaena asks softly, the anger and fear dragging her down into an inescapable exhaustion. You want me to train only so I can make a spectacle of my talents? Maeve ran a moon-white finger down the owl's head. I wish you to become who you were born to be. To become queen. Okay, love. So those are the vibes. So essentially we know now that Celaena is going to be staying at this castle, which is called Mistward, for the foreseeable future while Rowan trains her to see if she's like worthy to go to Dornell, the Fae City, and then Maeve will talk to her. She has to jump through some hoops. And Celaena is understandably like very annoyed with this whole interaction. Maeve was rude and scary. And also Celaena's like, I have literally been training my whole life. Like I'm an incredibly well-trained girl. So it seems annoying that we have to do more training. Also, I didn't want to become queen. So like, seems like working on the queen stuff, not an issue because that's not for me. I'm not going to become queen. Rowan continues to insist on calling her Aelin, and she's like, could you please stop? It would be best if no one here knew who I was. And Rowan's like, okay, whatever, girly. And then she said one of the foulest things she'd ever uttered in her life, bathing in the pure hate of it. Fae like you make me understand the King of Ardelane's actions a bit more, I think. Immediately she regrets this. Like, this is vile. She should not have said that. And Rowan punches her in the face. And she kind of deserves it. Although we should not be punching people in the face. It's never okay to punch people. Especially a girlie. And she tries to fight back, but Rowan easily, like, dodges her because he's a Fae. And so he has, like, Fae reflexes and Fae abilities. And he takes away all her weapons, sends her to a room, and lets her know that she'll be starting her work in the kitchens tomorrow because, like, everyone here contributes. So she will work in the kitchens in the morning and then train with him in the afternoons. Back to my girl, Manon. Manon is meeting up with her grandmother. So her grandmother is the head of the Blackbeak clan. So like I said, the Iron Teeth are, like, the larger group. And then within that, there's 3 clans. The Blackbeaks, the Yellowlegs, and the Blue Bloods. And Manon is the heir to, like, the Blackbeak throne. She's, like, the Blackbeak princess. And her grandmother is, like, the matron of the Blackbeak. The Blackbeak clan. And, she's sitting on this cliffside and letting the breeze run through her hair. And there were few sounds, I love this quote, so I'm going to read it to you. There are few sounds she enjoyed more than the groans of dying men, but the wind was one of them. When magic was still in the kingdom, the witches flew around on brooms, but since magic is gone, they haven't been able to fly on brooms anymore, and so she doesn't get the, like, treat of wind in her hair, which is sad. And she really misses it. We come to learn that Manon is the group of this, like, smaller group within the Blackbeaks called the 13. And there are 13 witches, Manon and 12 others, and they're currently tasked with protecting Manon's grandmother, who is the High Witch of the Blackbeak clan. The High Witch of the Blackbeak clan is talking with Duke Parrington right now. They are working together, and Manon isn't vibing with the energy. Something smells really off about him. Again, smells are hugely important. And he is weird smelling. But Grandma Blackbeak has some instructions for them. She is going to be tasked to send her 13 all over to gather witches in the Ferrian Gap. And the Ferrian Gap is this area within the White Fang Mountains that is, like, very remote and just, like, wildernessy. And so they are being sent to the Ferrian Gap because of the king. The king is sent for them because there's a gift for them there. They've been breeding wyverns, which are like these dragon-like creatures, for an aerial division of the army for the witches to ride, since they no longer ride brooms. So she has to gather all of the witches from all over the continent because, like I said, they've been scattered all over the place, and then they're going to meet up there and, like, learn how to ride the wyverns. And then once they are finished fighting for the king in his battles, they will get to keep the wyverns, and then they can go and take back over the Western Waste. That's, like, what the king has promised them. And so that's where we're starting with the witches, is we're gathering all of them in the Ferrian Gap. Back in the palace, we meet up with Chaol, and he is very tired from avoiding Dorian all day. Truly, that is what the text says. Chaol says, I'm so sleepy because I've been avoiding Dorian all day, and it was, like, a lot of work. And he's headed back to his rooms to go take a little snooze when he realizes that 2 of the 4 guards that are supposed to be sitting outside of, like, the Great Hall guarding it are not there. And he's like, come on, guys. And so he goes to the guards that are still there, and he's like, hey, guys, where are these 2? your friends. And they were like, so they like were like, nothing's really happening in the palace tonight. We're gonna sneak on out and go to Aedion's party. Remember that party they were invited to? Yes, the guards are there. And so Chaol decides to go and go get the guys and yell at them from abandoning their posts. And as soon as he gets there, Aedion has rented out this entire tavern and is like stuffed to the brim with people. It is very like raucous. He finds the 2 guards that were off their posts and he tells them to get back to the castle and he's gonna figure out their punishment tomorrow. And he finds like a bunch of his guys there. Like all the other ones are not supposed to be working. They're not on shift, but like it's a bunch of his guys and the party is getting kind of wild and he's a little bit concerned that this is going to reflect poorly on him if it gets out of hand. And so he's like, I need to find Aedion and like have a little chat with him about like what is appropriate behavior because this is not it. And so he's looking for Aedion in this party, this like bustling tavern, and Aedion is not there. Aedion is nowhere to be found. He cannot find Aedion anywhere. And Chaol's like, this is kind of weird. But we don't have time to dwell on it because we're back. We're back with Celaena. So after a terrible night's sleep, she had a rough night's sleep, she goes down to the kitchen. She is like truly a mess at this point. She is like, when she was in Wendlyn, she was just like drinking all the time. She's having a hard time sleeping. She's like not eating full meals. Like she is not well. And she goes downstairs and she meets the 2 other people she'll be working with primarily in the kitchen. So we have Emrys, who's this older guy, and he is like the head chef. And then we have Luca, who is like a teenager or young. He's like around Celaena's age probably. And he's assisting in the kitchen. And then she decides that she's going to go by Alentia, which is the name that Nehemia gave her. Again, she doesn't want to use Aelin, obviously, because she doesn't want to be known as the Princess of Terrasen. Seems dangerous. And also, I think she wanted to kind of cast off Celaena as well and all of the baggage that came with that. So she is using kind of the name that Alentia, or that Nehemia gave her as of Alentia. She immediately gets to work and is like working very hard in the kitchen. She's like looking forward to being like sore and tired at the end of the day and hoping that will help her sleep better. Like one thing you can say about Celaena, starts at the end, is that she's not lazy. Okay? She likes the finer things and likes life. She likes some leisure, but like she's not lazy. She's not a lazy girly. And so she's happy to be working hard, and she then goes and eats breakfast, and she eats a lot of it. And then she Emrys, the chef, notices that she's eating a lot, and he says, "Oh, eat all you like. There's nothing more satisfying to a cook than seeing someone enjoy his food." He said it with enough humor and kindness that it chafed. And then she's watching him and Luca kind of interact in the kitchen and kind of the jovial way that they interact with each other, and she thinks to herself, how would they react if they knew the things she had done? What would they do if they know about the blood she'd spilled? How she'd tortured Grave and taken him apart, piece by piece. The way she'd gutted Archer in that sewer. The way she'd failed her friend. Failed a lot of people. They were noticeably quieter as they sat down. They didn't ask her questions, which was perfect because she didn't really want to start a conversation. And they were so easy with each other, a family in their own way. Uncorrupted by a wicked empire, by years of brutality and slavery and bloodshed. She could almost see 3 souls in that kitchen lined up beside each other. Theirs bright and clear, and hers a flickering black flame. "Do not let that light go out," Nehemia's last words to her that night in the tunnels. Celaena pushed around the food on her plate. She had never known anyone whose life hadn't been overshadowed by Ardaline. She could barely remember her brief years before the continent had been enslaved, when Terrasen had still been free. She could not remember what it was like to be free. What a heavy breakfast conversation. But I think that was really important. I think I talked about it a lot when I was doing my Crown of Midnight recap. But for me, Celaena and Chaol both have very clear central pillars. And like I've talked about already in this book, Chaol's is loyalty, and I believe Celaena's is like freedom. And so for her to feel like she has not been free ever, she like can't remember a time when she was free, is like crucially important. This like, burden of the Empire has always weighed on her. So she sits down and she's having breakfast with the guys now that her shift in the kitchen is over, and they're chatting. And Luca says to her, "You must be either very important or very unlucky to have Rowan train you to enter Doranel." And she's like, "Isn't everyone who's here training to enter Doranel?" And Luca's like, "Yeah, sort of, but like for most of us it'll be like years and years and years, and we will not have like this elite captain of Maeve's guard essentially guiding us through this training. So like something different is happening with you." And Emrys explains that he actually is not trained to go to Doranel. He gave up after 10 years of trying to get into Doranel, and now they just live here. He lives here with his mate Malachi, because both of them have decided that like this life is a good enough life. They don't need to be in the Fae City. I also explained to her that the term half-breeds is rude, so don't do that anymore. A nicer term is demi-Fae. So these are the demi-Fae, or Fae that have one Fae parent and one human parent most of the time. And they have significantly less magic than the Fae, and a lot of them can't shift, and the magic they do have tends to be fairly unexciting. And we learn a little bit more about Rowan and the group of soldiers he is from. So he is one of 6 men who are like Maeve's elite guard, and they're like her right-hand men. And Rowan is apparently the meanest, notoriously, and his tattoo is supposedly a list of all the people he has ever killed. So, and it goes on his face and disappears under a shirt. We don't know how long it is. Okay, we jump around quite a bit, but we're back with the witches. So I wanted to kind of give a super brief introduction to the 13. We are not going to get a lot of details about a lot of these girlies, but we will hear their names kind of mentioned throughout. The ones that are most important, of course, Manon. She's the head of the 13, and then her second, Astrid. And Astrid is, witches do not have friends, but Astrid is someone Manon trusts, and the closest thing she has to a friend. And so they finally have all gathered. They've gathered all the witches. They're in the White Fang Mountains, and tensions are a little bit high. So like I mentioned, there are three groups within the Iron Teeth: the Blackbeaks, the Yellow Legs, and the Blue Bloods. And tensions are high because although they are now working under a common banner, they're very separate groups, and they used to be in competition and fights with each other. And so a lot of fights have been breaking out all over camp. And if anyone has a fight, they're punished heavily, but that doesn't mean that stopped them from happening. So they arrive, and pretty quickly they have a funeral for Baba Yellowlegs, even though no one had really known this woman, but she was the High Witch of the Yellowlegs. So they're paying her due respect. And of course, if we recall, Celaena Trains is the one that murdered her. We love that. Astrid, in kind of the conclusion to the funeral, winds up getting into a fight with the Yellowlegs witch, and as punishment, Manon literally just punches her. Corporal punishment is how the witches get everything done, and often it's doled out by people within their own groups. So for her punishment for fighting with the Yellowlegs witch, Manon just punches her repeatedly in the stomach. So fun, cute, fresh. Let's chat a little bit about Manon and the girlies that she's with. So like I said, Manon is the heir to the Blackbeak line, and then we have Petra and Iskra. Petra is the heir to the Blue Blood line, and then Iskra is the heir to the Yellow Legs line. They're the top of the top for each of these three groups, and so they're kind of the leaders for the fellow witches. And so they are taken down to see the wyverns for the first time. And a bunch of the king's men bring out these wyverns, which will mostly be played by How to Train Your Dragons. Is that what they actually look like? I don't know, but that's how they look in my head. So that's how they'll look for the duration of this presentation. And they bring out this big gray wyvern named Titus. He's the biggest and the coolest and the baddest. And Manon immediately is I want that one. That one is mine because I'm also the meanest and the coolest and the baddest. So I need the coolest and the baddest wyvern. And so she looks at Titus and she says, "You and me, buddy." But she knows that Petra and Iskra are probably into him as well because he's the coolest and the baddest. We gotta watch our backs for these other girls. Back to Celaena and Rowan. It's the end of her breakfast shift. Rowan comes to pick her up and takes her out to train. And they're training at these ancient ruins. And Rowan is immediately I do not care about you. I do not care about all this pretense you're putting on or how vicious you are under all of it. I have been 10 times as nasty for 10 times longer than you've been alive. Okay, what a line. What a bar. And he essentially is shift. And Celaena's I literally cannot shift on command. I have not used magic since I was 8 years old, so... Rowan continues to demand it, and when she does not comply, he attacks her. He tries to fight her off, and for the first time in a very, very long time, Celaena feels completely outmatched. He is so much better than her because he has those Fae instincts. And so even though she is incredibly well trained, she is the best assassin in all of Ardelayne, she's still not as fast and as cool and as good at this as he is. And he's fighting her, and he calls her a coward, which strikes her particularly hard, because that was the thing that Nehemia said to her during the fight they had right before Nehemia died. And so she is upset about it, and Rowan says, "Get up." She is fallen over, she's crumpled over, he's gotten her, and he's "Get up." And Celaena realizes she has to try for Nehemia, but when she reached in towards the place in her chest where the monster dwelled, she found only cobwebs and ashes. We will continue to explore this over the course of this novel. This is essentially the central point for Celaena, but Celaena really thinks that the issue that she's having is she's not able to access the Celaena Sartothian. She's not able to access the assassin that is at her core, this monster that lives within her that comes out when she is assassin Celaena. And that's the thing that's gonna help her defeat this empire. That's why she doesn't need to worry about the queen part. She doesn't need to deal with her grief and her emotions. She just needs to find that monster, that rage again. But as we will come to find, that is not really what is going to fuel her in the long term. And so, since she is being annoying, Rowan decides to take her to this place called the Burrows. And it is this grassy hill that is covered in these big dirt mounds that are tombs. And Celaena can immediately feel that it feels alive here. It feels like the tombs are almost breathing. And Rowan says if you can make it to the other side of the field, then you can go to Dorian. But she's gonna have to fight these barrow wights, which are like these like creatures that live within the tomb, so like zombie-esque creatures. And Rowan's like, you can either wait to earn your weapons back, or you can try now. And Celaena says, my hands are weapons enough. Okay, girl. Again, she's really trying to lean into that assassin swagger because she thinks that's gonna help her. It's Sean to help her. And Rowan's like, okay, whatever, I'll meet you on the other side of the field. And so she starts across the field, and it starts getting darker, and the barrow wights aren't moving from the burrows. Like, they're just standing at the openings and watching her walk by, and she says, this seems like too easy. Something is clearly going wrong. And she hears this breathing in her ears, and she tries to start running, but then everything goes pitch black, and she's thrown back in her memory to the moment in which she woke up in her parents' bed, covered in their blood, and she hears it sounded like a servant screaming. So this like childhood memory of her parents' death. And Celaena like knows it isn't real, but it feels incredibly real, and she's trying to convince herself that it's not real, but like she's having a really hard time, and she does throw up and pee her pants. Is this the second mention of a peeing pants in this book? Yeah. We're not gonna keep track of how many people pee their pants in this book, because it's many, more than I would like. And so she's like freaking out. She's trying to get out of this memory. And then as she like leaves that room, she winds up in Nehemiah's room, and she experiences again this like brutal massacre of Nehemiah's death. And she's just like trapped in this cycle, and she's trying to get out of it. And she's like running, and she is able to make it to Rowan somehow. Somehow she makes it to Rowan, and she's like literally screaming, crying, throwing up. And she is like shifting back and forth between fae form and human form, and she feels like this well of power opening up in her stomach and like filling with fire, and she starts shifting back and forth, and the power keeps like, she's like glitching. She passes out. When she wakes up, he's like, you have no discipline or no control and no courage. And Rowan's like, I know you made it across the field, but it doesn't count because I literally had to drag you out. Also, that was not a wight, and I don't know what that was. So also trouble is brewing. So we don't know what's happening, but we will revisit them in a moment because we've got to go check on Chaol. Chaol and Daddy Westfall have been having a little meeting, and his dad is like, it seems like even though you told me you were coming to the Nell with me, you haven't done any preparations to actually leave. Because I was talking to the king, and he seemed to have no idea that you were leaving. And Chaol's like, so I need to find like a really good replacement. Again, mind you, this job like mostly requires like him scheduling guards and like occasionally detective work, which he's not even that good at. So I don't know how great of a replacement he needs. No offense to Chaol, my beloved, but this job doesn't seem that hard. Like, it seems like it shouldn't be that hard to find a replacement. But his dad's like, okay, I'll give you 2 months to figure out everything, to get your affairs in order, and then you have to meet me in a Nell. Also, now you owe me a favor because I'm letting you stay a little bit longer, which is not a good situation to be in. He does not want to owe his dad a favor, but it is what it is, and it's where he's at. Dorian summons Sorscha to his chambers to fix up some injury. I don't even remember what it was. It's fake. Dorian is like fake hurting himself, so Sorscha has to come visit him. And he starts to learn more about her, learning where she's from, and he learns that she's from Fenharrow, and he kind of learns the story of her family's death, and he just like is flirting with her. And once again, he finds out that her family was murdered by his family. And this is a problem he's had more than once. And it's honestly not a problem that you should ever have. But when you start to see a trend in which all the girls you're in love with, your dad has murdered their families, maybe something bad is afoot. And so once again, we have the same tension that we had with Celaena and Dorian, and that is that the Empire is ruined their lives. And now they're left picking up the pieces. And Dorian's like, sorry about that. Jumping again. We're jumping to Manon and the girls. So we're back with the witches. The witches are in the dining hall. It is a very dangerous sort of situation in the dining hall because this is where all the clans meet. Like, they train pretty much separately, but they all eat together. And so a lot of fights are breaking out all of the time. And also they're being served slop. Like, the girls' preference is drinking the blood of men, and that's just not really accessible to them. It's not necessary for them to live. They can eat like pretty much anything and be fine. But like, it would be nice if they had some better food. So everyone's cranky. And of course, there is some bickering that occurs between Manon and Iskra, put to rest pretty quickly because the 13 are going flying today, which is so exciting, which is so exciting because, like I mentioned, the witches have not been able to fly since magic was leashed, once magic was like banished from the continent, and they're gonna get to fly again for the first time today. Yay! And so 13 head out to the wyverns for the first time. They've been practicing saddling the wyverns for a few days now, so they are like familiar with the creatures, but this is the first time they're taking to the air, and today they're attempting the crossing. And the crossing is something that'll come up a few times. It is this big canyon between two cliff faces, and it's pretty narrow, so like the wyverns have to stay like pretty like centered, and if anything goes wrong they'll just fall on the rocks. There's like not enough space for them to like correct themselves very easily, so it's like a tricky place to be. They get on their wyverns, they're riding around, they make the crossing, and they're just like flying through the air, and it is just like such a joyous experience. And Manon thinks to herself as they fly for the first time in a decade, the whoops and cackles of her 13 as they rode on the current were finer than any mortal music. Gorgeous. Also, we learned their little slogan. They have a little cute sweet slogan that is, "We are the 13 from now until the darkness claims us." And I love a motto. I love a family motto. I think in fantasy books, like families and clans often have mottos, and I really think we usually lean more into mottos in like family and friend groups. After they're done flying, Manon heads back in and she has a meeting with her grandmother. Mother Blackbeak praises everything they did. They did a great job at flying for the day. She proved herself well. And then Grandma Blackbeak explains that she wants Manon to become the wing leader. And the wing leader, if you've read Fourth Wing, is going to be like the boss of like the troops, and there's going to be one wing leader for all of the Iron Teeth, and Grandma Blackbeak wants Manon to be that one wing leader. But she also knows that both the Blue Bloods and the Yellow Legs matrons are probably also giving the same instructions to their girls. So she's like, watch your back. Says, I will not be pleased if I have to find another heir, aka it's going to be some work for me if you get murdered, so like please figure it out. And Manon's like, as you will it, grandmother. Back with Celaena Trains. She shows up the next morning and the kitchen's looking rough. Like she's got black eyes and she looks beaten up. But someone had cleaned her clothes from the day before and left them outside her door, so she's dressed, she's ready to go. She like works in the morning in the kitchen, and Luca offers her some salve and she goes, I've been through worse. And this does not comfort them. Surprisingly, shockingly, they're not like, that's not great. Like, we wish you hadn't been through worse. Like, we wish your life had been nice. And also, you can still use this salve. Anyway, she does that. Then they head out to training. And today, training with Rowan is just sitting by the temple ruins while Rowan demands she shifts. And she doesn't do it. She just sits there. And he makes her just sit out there all day. And there's like a thunderstorm. It rains on her. And they just sit in the field. And she does not shift. That night, she is up in her room and she decides to go downstairs for dinner in the dining room because she's hungry. And she was hoping to just like be able to grab dinner and it to be a quiet affair. But when she gets down to the kitchen, it is super crowded and busy in there. And so she tries to just grab food and sneak out before anyone notices, but then Emrys starts telling a story. So Emrys, we come to find out, is like the story keeper. It's like a highly renowned and respected position within a community, is this elder that will like share and like keep the stories of their history. And so Celaena sits down on the stairs and starts to listen. And it's a story about the horrific creatures that haunt these lands and like are wandering around in the forest at night. And it makes Celaena think about the fact that Rowan wouldn't let them light a fire. And she's like, that makes sense. That checks out. Okay, so there's nasties in the forest and I don't want them to come get me. And after he's done, he's like, Alentia, tell us a story from your home. And Celaena literally just stands up, turns around and walks up the stairs. And she thinks to herself she had no stories to tell. All the legends of Terrasen were lost to her and only fragments were strewn through her memory like rubble. So she like doesn't feel like she even has any stories of Terrasen, which is just like devastating. As she's leaving, she looks out the window and she sees the white-tailed hawk and she realizes that that's Rowan in his shifted form. So anytime we see a hawk in this book, it's actually Rowan. I mean, there might be other hawks, but like most of the time it's Rowan. Back at the palace. We're jumping around quite a bit. Back at the palace, we're meeting back up with Dorian, who is once again at the healer's office. He has been literally trying to find an excuse to go to see the healers every single day. He's like, I sprained my ankle. I stubbed my knee. He stubbed his knee? Yeah, that's the kind of things he's going with. Sorscha is like a good sport about it. Because, like, remember, she has a little bit of a crush on Dorian. And Sorscha this time asks about Fleetfoot and Celaena's dog. And Dorian vaguely tells her about the creatures, like super vaguely. But still I'm like, girl, and by girl I mean Dorian, why are you telling her this? Bobby, you can't be telling the people this. I know she's a cute girl, but you do not know her at all. Like, we cannot be telling her about the monsters and the word keys and, like, all of this stuff, even if we're keeping it vague. He's, like, sometimes the dumbest boy in all the castle. And Sorscha's like, this seems, like, super dangerous. Like, if the king were to find out about this, he'd probably hurt both Celaena and Chaol. And Dorian gets so upset at the thought of Chaol, or Celaena getting hurt. The magic explodes out of him and messes up the whole office. It goes like everywhere, and it really scares Sorscha. But she like immediately gathers herself and she's like, okay, we're gonna figure out how to deal with this. Like, maybe we could like come up with some sort of tonic to like help you suppress your magic, because like this is dangerous. Oh, it's not working. Like, this is not working for me. You exploding all my stuff. It's not working. She's like, but I'm gonna help you figure it out. And so exciting. Dorian's got a friend that's gonna help him. Chaol is like last we left Chaol, he was at a party. This time he's following Aedion. So he goes to a separate party, different night. He's following Aedion out of a party. He watches Aedion kind of like make an appearance and then leave. And he's following him. And it turns out he's meeting with a strange man in an alleyway. It's not a usual spot to purchase drugs, but it's really far away from everything else. And so he begins to suspect it might be rebel activity. And as he's like kind of eavesdropping, someone comes up behind him with a knife. And he didn't hear them because, I don't know, Chaol is really oblivious to his surroundings. Remember, his job in the Royal Guard is mostly scheduling. Okay? We love him. Sweet boy. But like, how did you not hear someone coming up behind you with a knife? Also, like, I just feel like he could have been more careful. Anyway, he gets tied up and brought to a warehouse, and immediately he sees the old guy from the night that he had been kidnapped the first time back in Crown of Midnight. And she's like, suspicious. Clearly this is connected to the rebels. And Aedion's like, you were literally such a bad spy. And too bad your champion, Celaena, isn't here to save you this time. And Chaol's like, I actually came to warn you about that ring. He's like, you know that ring on your finger? Like, it might actually be controlling you a little bit. So like, be super, super duper careful with that. And Aedion's like, I'm not the dumbest boy in the castle. That title belongs solely to Dorian. This ring smelled weird when I got it, and so I chucked it in the river, and this is a fake one. This is a replica. So don't even worry, my buddy. Why has no one else been able to smell the fact that this ring is weird and that now Aedion has a fake one? I don't know. We don't ask questions about that. And Aedion starts to ask questions about Chaol's assassin friend, since she was clearly a rebel sympathizer. I'm going to read you like a passage from this section. We got some Chaol internal thoughts here. We're in Chaol's head. Regardless of how shattered she'd been when she left, Celaena was safe now. She was away from Ardalan. But Dorian, with his magic, with the threat he secretly posed, was not. Aedion took a ready breath to kill him. Keeping Dorian protected was all he had left. All that really ever mattered. These rebels indeed did know something. Anything about magic that might help to free it, he could use Aedion to help get that information. It was a gamble. The biggest gamble he'd ever made. Aedion raised his sword. With a silent prayer for forgiveness, Chaol looked straight at Aedion. Aelin is alive. Sorry, chills. What a good moment. He is gambling in the fact that Aedion is not lying about the fact that that ring is fake, that he is really a rebel sympathizer. Otherwise, he just put Aelin in danger, in tremendous danger, by saying that, like, she's alive. Luckily for us, Aedion is not lying about the fact that he is a, like, rebel sympathizer to the highest degree. And these are his thoughts when he hears that Aelin is alive. This is the first time I teared up. The amount of times I cried while reading this book and making these slides is an embarrassing amount. Like, I'm a pretty easy crier in general, but like, I probably cried, like, tears left my eyeballs at least a dozen times while reading this book and making these slides. It is so good. It's so good. Anyway, this is the first time. Aedion Ashryer had been called Wolf, general, prince, traitor, and murderer, and he was all of these things and more. Liar, deceiver, and trickster were his particular favorites, the titles only those closest to him knew. Ardalan's whore, that's what the ones who didn't know him called him. It was true. In so many ways, it was true, and he had never minded it, not really, until now. Cousin, that had been his most beloved title. Cousin, kin, protector. Those were the secret names he had harbored deep within himself. The names he whispered to himself when the northern wind was shrieking through the staghorns. Sometimes that wind sounded like the screams of his people being led to the butchering blocks, and sometimes it sounded like Aelin whom he had loved, who should have been his queen, whom he would have one day swore the blood oath. Aedion is shook. Obviously, he had heard the rumors about Aelin being alive, but he hadn't believed them. He had not been there when Aelin's family had been killed, but he had, like, seen the aftermath. And he suspected she was gone as well. He never allowed himself to even have a glimmer of hope that she was still alive. And he has the sword of Orinth, that should by all rights be Aelin's. And he is just, like, thinking about the fact that she's still there. And he blames himself somewhat for what happened when Aelin's family was murdered, even though he was only 13 at the time, because he felt like he should have been there to protect him. And Chaol tells him the story of Celaena, and who was raised by Erebin and found on the frozen river. The story of Aelin, his queen, in a death camp and then serving in her enemy's house. Like, this, just like the horrific things that she's gone through. And Chaol says to Aedion, she has your eyes. And Aedion is immediately, like, really upset, just like everyone else. Chaol sent Aelin to Wendlyn, and he knows that Queen Maeve is incredibly dangerous, and, like, that she's in danger just by being so close. And Chaol is like, I really did it to keep her safe. And Aedion is like, you are the dumbest. You are dumb. You are maybe dumber than Dorian. And like, why you are so dumb. Why did you tell me this? This is so dangerous. You have no real evidence that I am actually someone who would help her and not betray her. Like, you could have gotten her killed. Does the prince know? And Chaol shakes his head. And Aedion asks, why did you put yourself at risk like you did for this? Like, also, like, you were putting yourself in tremendous risk by saying that you know this information. And Chaol says, I thought you might have useful information and you'd be willing to trade information with you. Like, I need information. And that's where we leave the boys. Celaena is back in the kitchen. She's healing up. She's been spending her mornings in the kitchen and her days training with Rowan for a few weeks now. Training is not going particularly well. Rowan is still trying to get her to shift, but she refuses. They mostly just like sit around all day. And he threatens to take her back to the burrows, and Celaena said she'd slit her own throat before she went back there. So, great. On the 8th day that they're sitting out there, Celaena's like, why don't you shift? I want to see your form. And Rowan goes, boom, hawk, your turn. And Celaena tries to shift, but it like doesn't work. She's like really struggling, and she looks at Rowan and she's like, this sort of seems like punishment. Like having to train me. This seems difficult. Did you like do something to make Maeve angry? And Rowan is like, stop, you're being annoying. And Celaena says, you can't make me stop unless you rip my tongue out. And he does grab her tongue and then bites her. He does. And Celaena is so upset that he has bitten her that she shifts into her fae form. And she's like, boom. And Rowan goes, there you are. And she's kind of freaked out, but everything smells really good, including Rowan, who smells like snow and pine. We love. And then her magic overwhelms her, and Rowan is like let it out, and the world just is swallowed in blue flames. But Rowan has the ability to control air, and so his ability is able to snuff the fire out because he can take away its oxygen source. And then she's back to her normal form, and Rowan asks, does your lover know what you are? And she's like, yeah, for sure, which is low-key a lie. Like, Chaol knows the fact that she's fae, and she gave him clues to maybe lead him to the fact that she might be queen, but like she doesn't know for a fact that he knows that she's queen, even though we do know that he knows that she's queen. Okay. And then Rowan says, I won't bite you again because you don't bite the women of other males. Okay. I didn't love that line. I didn't. That's not my favorite line in this book. Maybe my least favorite. It grossed me out. Women are not possessions. She is Queen Aedion Ashryer Galathinius, the lost queen of Terrasen, Ardaline's assassin. Like, we don't bite her because she's a Queenie McQueenie, not because she's Chaol's girlfriend. Okay, Rowan? Let's get it together. And Celaena's not that upset about it, but Celaena explains, we're not together anymore, her and Chaol. And Rowan asks why, and she says, because he's safer if he is as repulsed by me as you are. And then Rowan says, at least you've learned one lesson. The people you love are just weapons to be used against you. And Rowan asks her to shift again, but she can't. And she's like, well, why don't you just bite me again? She's getting sassy. And Rowan says, why don't I give you the lashing you deserve? And Celaena looks at him and she goes, if you ever take a whip to me, I will skin you alive. Okay, we love a threat. And Rowan says, okay, fine. Then if you don't shift, you'll be pulling double shifts in the kitchen all next week. And Celaena says, that's fine. And Rowan goes, you are worthless. And Celaena says, tell me something I don't know. And Rowan says, you probably would have been more useful to the world if you had died 10 years ago. And Celaena says, okay, I'm actually leaving. Like, you are being such an asshole. I have to go. She goes back to her room and she starts packing up her stuff. And Rowan shows up, and Rowan is like, is this what you always do, run away when things get hard? And Celaena is like, literally go to hell. Like, I don't want you to train me anymore. I don't want to do this. I'm going to figure out some other way to get the answers I need for the word keys. And Rowan says, have you ever had to fight for anything in your entire life? And Celaena's like, I'm literally trying to save the whole continent from the king of Ardalain, but no one will help me. And Rowan goes, maybe the world's not even worth saving. Okay. Like, somebody get this boy a Hot Topic gift card. Like, what? Maybe the world's not even worth saving. He says stuff like this all the time that just like makes me giggle, because I'm like, seriously, bro. And Celaena says, I made a vow. And Rowan says, okay, you made a vow and you value that, but what if your own people? Like, you refuse to be the queen of Terrasen. What about them? And Celaena says, they are better off without me, just like you are. And Rowan asks, why can't your friend save her own kingdom? And Celaena says, because she's dead and I am left with my worthless life. And she storms out the door and she leaves. So she's leaving and she's walking. She's literally no idea where she's going. She's just wandering around in the dangerous woods, as we know. And she decides to light a fire. I love Celaena Sarthethian. I love her. She's a sweet, smart girl. Sometimes she makes bad choices, and this is one of those, because remember how the woods are full of bad things? Yeah, fire's gonna bring them there. And she finds a little cave and she decides to hunker down for the night. Suddenly everything goes silent. And she remembers her brains, and she goes, oh yeah, Rowan was like never lighting a fire because there were spooky ooky things in the woods. And I heard those stories about the spooky ooky things in the woods. So like, I've been the dumbest girl in the world to light a fire. And so she sneaks out of her cave and slips into the forest and realizes that fire is like a giant beacon guiding anyone who wants to find her there. And as she's in the forest, she sees the silhouettes of 3 figures standing just outside her cave. And like, she's like, ooh, those guys are probably bad news. They look like men, but she knows they're not. She starts to run away and Rowan grabs her. And Rowan looks at her and is like, you are going to listen to every word I say, or else you are going to die tonight. You need to shift right now. And Celaena's like, I literally cannot shift on command. Can't you just use your magic to like take all the air away from them? And Rowan's like, those guys are not people. They are scary monsters and they don't breathe. So that won't help us. And Celaena realizes how like dangerous of a situation she is in, and she also realizes what a risk Rowan has put himself in to help her. And so she does wind up shifting. And Rowan's like, okay, we're gonna run. And they start running, but the guys who actually are skinwalkers are like really keeping up. They can run pretty well. So like, it's not working super well. So Celaena's like, I got a little plan. Okay, do what I do. And so her and Rowan jump off a little thing and she bursts into flames. She explodes into fire. Rowan flies away in his hawk form. And they land in this river, and Celaena is shaking, curled up on the side of the river, and Rowan is still working on putting her flames out because she lit a lot of stuff on fire because she's not super great at controlling her magic. And he explains that she needs to get really comfortable shifting because she's so scared of it. So it really increases the chances of burning herself out. And so we have this conversation around burnout. So burnout is this thing that magical creatures can experience, and everyone's magic is like a well with a bottom, and different people have different like depths of magic. Some people are super shallow, and then people have really, really, really deep depths of magic, which means it takes longer to access. And that's why she's actually shaking, is because she like pulled out too much power too quickly, and so it like depleted her, and so that's why she's all like rattled. And Celaena thanks him for saving her, and Rowan is like, I literally have an unbreakable blood oath with Queen Maeve, and she told me I had to, so I had to. But also I wouldn't have let anyone die at the hands of the skinwalkers. They are heinous, vile creatures, so I would have helped you regardless. And Rowan says, like, your magic was much more under control this time than when we were in that field. Like, your clothes aren't burned up. And he's like, that's really interesting. And Celaena is like, I didn't want to hurt you. So, like, I was in better control of my magic because I didn't want it to hurt you. And Rowan asks her, would you have shifted to save yourself? And Celaena says, your opinion of me is pretty much identical to my own, so you know the answer. And Rowan says to her, you're not leaving. And then he tosses his cloak back to her so she has something to keep her warm, and they head back to the castle. I think this is the first time Rowan has gotten like a glimpse of the goodness of Celaena. He's just kind of up to this point thought she was kind of like a mean spoiled girly, and now he knows that she's like kind of a sad mean spoiled girly. So adds another layer to things. Back with our witches, it is time for the witches to pick their mounts. It's time for them to pick their wyverns. As we talked about, Manon wants Titus, the biggest, baddest wyvern. But also she knows that Iskra and probably Petra also want Titus. So a few wyverns have already been selected. Astrid gets this pale blue wyvern that she knows is going to be super sneaky. It's going to be great for spying because it like will blend in with the sky. And Petra selects a different wyvern, and Titus is brought out onto the like field, and they're like on this cliff overlooking the like arena where the wyverns are. And Iskra pushes Manon off of the cliff, and now Manon's in the pit with Titus, and he wants to eat her up. Okay, great. And she's trying to fight off Titus when the bait wyvern enters. So they have these wyverns that are just like these little, the like runts of the litter, these like smaller wyverns that are used to bait the bigger wyverns into fighting. One was going to be brought into the pit, obviously, to kind of rile Titus up. Now Manon's on the floor of this arena, and she's got this bait wyvern behind her and Titus in front of her, and the bait wyvern is currently chained up, but Manon has decided that like maybe if she undoes his chains, they can be on the same team. It can be like 2 against 1, and that is like better odds. So she decides she would rather have him be a possible ally, and so she releases him from his chains, and then they're working together, and she cuts off Titus's tail while the bait wyvern jumps and rips out Titus's throat. The bait beast had trounced Titus, not because he was stronger or bigger, but because he wanted it more. Titus had been a brute, a killer, yet this wyvern before her, he was a warrior. Manon puts out a hand to this bait wyvern and says, he is mine. And this bait wyvern is the love of my life. the best character in this whole series, the sweetest little angel and earth boy. This is Abraxos. He will be portrayed by Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon in this whole series. And I understand that's not exactly how he's supposed to look in real life, but that's how he looks in my heart. And he's just like a precious gem, a precious little angel boy. I love him so much. And so Astrid, after this all happens, Manon is pulled out, and Astrid is punished for allowing Manon to be pushed in. Like, her second should have had her back, and she's whipped by Iskra. Because, again, corporal punishment is how it rolls here in the Witches. And Manon gets slapped in the face for being an embarrassment to the Blackbeaks, and for picking the runt of the litter, picking this little scrawny little wyvern. But Manon knows that Abraxos has a warrior's heart. So Abraxos isn't actually ready to start flying with all the other wyverns yet, because he hasn't been trained. Like, he has been just like chilling downstairs with all the other bait wyverns. And so they're like, you're gonna have to start training with another wyvern while we get him up to scruff, like get him ready. And Manon is like, literally, don't tell me what to do. She's like, I'm gonna train with him. And they're like, we don't even know if he can fly. Like, he hasn't been strengthening his wings in the right way. Like, he hasn't been allowed to fly before. He's been kept in the bait cages his entire life. And Manon is like, I will literally handle it. Like, please. It's so annoying how there's so many boys around and they keep telling me what to do. And we will be back with them later with Abraxos, my love. Back at the castle, Chaol brings Aedion down to the tombs. Dorian follows Chaol and can't believe that he's telling Aedion about Celaena, because remember, he doesn't know anything, so he doesn't know that Aedion is Celaena's cousin. Dorian overhears Chaol tell Aedion everything about the word gates, and then learns that Celaena is Aedion's cousin. And Dorian's like, they didn't even tell me that. Like, I'm so out of the loop. Chaol's telling this rando more so than he even told me. And again, Chaol does not notice Dorian because he does not have any situational awareness, and I don't know how he's head of security at the palace. It seems like it should be a requirement of the job, but that's okay. Eventually, Dorian gets spotted by Aedion because he has more situational awareness than Chaol, and Chaol races over to where Dorian is. Why didn't you tell me any of these secrets? Aren't we best friends? And Chaol is like, the less people that knew, the safer she would be. I'm just trying to keep her safe. And Dorian's like, I wouldn't tell my dad. And you trust him? No, this guy. Pointing over at Aedion. And Chaol's like, sort of. I needed to find a way to free magic to save you. Like, we need them to help us. Dorian turns to Aedion. He's like, are you gonna kill my dad? And Aedion's like, I mean, like, probably. Your dad is the worst. So, like likely. Dorian's like, fine. I'm not gonna tell anyone, but, like, I don't want to be included in these plans. Like, I know my dad's kind of the worst, but I kind of don't want to murder him either. And Chaol's like, okay, it's fine. I literally was trying to keep you out of it. So, great. We'll just go back to that plan that I originally had. And Aedion leaves through the secret tunnels and meets up with Wren and Murtaugh, who are both rebels from a Terracin. We will encounter them multiple times. I think Wren is Murtaugh's grandson, so Murtaugh is older. Wren is, like, I assume, in his 20s, so everyone knows. And Aedion is hesitant to share very much. He doesn't want to, like, put Celaena at risk because, like Chaol, he knows the less people that know, the better. But they're asking a lot of questions, and they are currently looking for members of Orlan's inner circle, so the royal family's inner circle, because if Aelin is alive, she will need supporters. They're also a little bit hesitant about that as well, because Aelin was so young when her parents were killed. Like, people don't really know who she is as a person, but, like, she's their best hope, so they're working with it. And they keep mentioning this name. This name will come up a lot in this book, and that is Elide Locken, which is the daughter of the Locken family, who would be just a year younger than Celaena, and she also went missing that night. So both of these girls have gone missing and are potentially people that will, like, help strengthen, like, the nobility of Terracin again, so they have, like, that support if Aelin is found. So that's what's happening. We've got some political scheming over in Rifthold. Back at Mistward, we've got Miss Celaena. It's a week later. She still hasn't mastered shifting, and they're still practicing that. And Celaena asks Rowan why they practice at these same ruins every day, besides the fact that it's, like, far enough from the castle that if, like, she explodes, she, like, won't burn everything down. And he explains that it is the temple for the sun goddess Mala. And so we kind of get, like, a brief overview of, like, these 3/2 main goddesses. So we have Mala, the sun goddess and the light bringer, and she is sister and rival to Diana, who is the keeper of the moons. We've got the sun goddess and the moon goddess, but then we have Mab, and Mab and Diana are, like, the same people, sort of. I'm kind of confused by it. Essentially, Mab was Celaena's great-great-grandmother, and she was Maeve's sister, and she was immortalized into godhood by Maeve and sort of, like, absorbed into Diana. Like, some traits were added when she was, like, added to, like, the godhood, but, like, it's kind of confusing, and I'm still confused by it. But essentially, she's the great-great-grandmother of the Ashryer line, and so both Aedion and Aelin and the whole Ashryer royal family are descendants from her, and they all have their special eyes. Gorgeous. And Celaena asks if Rowan was like there for all of it, and asks essentially like how old he is, and he's like, I'm old, but like not that old, like I'm relatively young for my kind. I love talking about ages of immortal men. I find it like fascinating. Like I could write a whole essay, I could do a whole video about just like why immortal men are so often the love interest for these like barely adult young women in fantasy novels and romance books, because I think it's really interesting. I think sometimes people are like, ew, and like that's not my take. I think there's like much more we could say and explore about that. I think it's interesting. And it, like, to be honest, like almost all my favorite books have this trope, and I'm just like fascinated by it. Anyway, Celaena's talking about the Fae she knew back in Terrasen, and also kind of mentions the fact that Maeve never sent any aid when the continent was being taken over by the king. She's like, why didn't Maeve help? And Rowan was like, I don't know, we'd already severed ties, so whatever, we offered asylum to anyone who could make it out here. And Celaena's like, okay, that's really not particularly helpful. Mostly everyone got murdered, so that really didn't do very much. And as she's headed, the next day, Celaena is leaving with Rowan. She's like headed out of the castle, and she smiles at someone for the first time in the hallway, and they act like so confused. Like she's spread it under their head. And Rowan like kind of chuckles at this because essentially Aelin has been putting off a smell that only the like Fae and Demi-Fae can smell that is like really cranky. And essentially says, leave me the heck alone. This is not like particularly important to the story. It was just like funny to me that she's like smells too cranky to interact with. And Celaena is like, honestly, that's kind of ideal. I like do not want to talk to any men ever. And Rowan asked her like, when you are queen, wouldn't you marry for an alliance? And Celaena says, nice try. I'm not going to be queen. And they head out somewhere different than usual for the day. Where are they headed? They are headed to this place where a woman's body has been found, and essentially all the life has been drained out of her. She like has been like vampire sucked out of her, and Rowan is like, what do you suspect about this body? And Celaena is reminded of that monster that pulled her through her worst memories, and Rowan again did not know what that was, and like essentially his only interaction with it was that little moment with Celaena, and he tells her that this is the fourth body they found, but no one from town has been reported missing, so it's been strange that they've been having these bodies turn up. And they investigated a bit, but they decide to head back to the castle before dark. But before they leave, Celaena insists they must bury the body because, you know, respectful. She's respectful of her dead. Then we head back to the Rifthold, and this time Chaol has turned up in Celaena Sarthothian's little apartment. Chaol hadn't seen or heard from the general or the prince since that night in the tomb. According to his men, the prince was spending his time in the healers at catacombs, courting one of the young women down there. He hated himself, but some part of him was relieved to hear it. At least Dorian was talking to someone. The rift with Dorian was worth it. For Dorian, even if his friend never forgave him. For Celaena, even if she never came back. Even if he wished she were still Celaena and not Aelin, it was worth it. Okay, so Chaol is dealing with all of that, and he meets Aedion in this apartment. It is Celaena's apartment, we know. It was given to Chaol and Celaena as well. Unfortunately, Celaena is not dead. So, like, I don't know why Chaol's like, I can for sure come here and use this whenever I want. Like, it's in her will, so, like, you can have it if she's dead. She's not dead. I do feel like this is, like, majorly overstepping. Like, girlie is not dead. You cannot have her stuff yet. But it is, he feels like it's a safe place that no one really knows about. And it's been, like, covered up since Celaena left it. So Celaena left it at the end of Assassin's Blade. Was the last time she was at this apartment, so all it like has been well taken care of. Arobynn like closed up the apartment and like put sheets over everything, and it's like tidy. Chaol is then reminded the fact that Arobynn Hamel knows her secret. Like Arobynn Hamel knows almost everything. He's the one who discovered her on the river that night, so like he knows probably that she's the Queen of Terrasen. And he is stressed by this because Arobynn Hamel is scum of the earth and the worst man alive, so like obviously he's gonna rat her out. And he thinks to himself, like, it's so weird that Aelin has not murdered Arobynn yet. Like that would be what I would do if I was Aelin. Anyway, he looks around the apartment. It's decorated in Terrasen's green and silver, and when Aedion arrives, he can tell that Aedion is like really overwhelmed by being in this place that is surrounded by these like tokens of his cousin, and so Chaol just gives Aedion a moment to like take in this apartment where she kept her things. And like the apartment is like incredibly comfortable. It has like Celaena loves shopping and loves stuff, and so it has like a lot of souvenirs from her travels, and it has like beautiful clothes, and it is just like it really has a lot of books in it. It is really this like small piece of Celaena. And then once Aedion has like had his time, they start discussing what it was like when magic disappeared, and they're trying to deduce and try to figure out like how magic disappeared and how they can bring it back so Dorian can be safe. And so they're talking about how the magic kind of like was taken away in like waves. They could like almost like feel it moving across the continent, and like animals were like racing against these waves of magic getting locked away, and there was a couple waves. It seems like 3 waves coming from 3 different directions. And Aedion asks him, tell me why the captain of the guard, a lord of Ardelane, is helping his enemy. That's all the information I want from you today. So that's the information they're trading. And Chaol says in response, I grew up being told we were bringing peace and civilization to the continent. What I've seen recently has made me realize how much of it is a lie, Chaol said. You knew about the labor camps, though. About the massacres. It is easy to be lied to when you do not know any of those people firsthand. But Celaena with her scars, and Nehemia with her people butchered. It is easy to believe when your king tells you that the people in Endover deserve to be there because they're criminals or rebels who try to slaughter innocent Ardelanian families. I think this is really important. I think something that SarahJMaas does really well through Chaol. I think she does a really great job with Chaol, highlighting the fact that when you are kind of given the same propaganda your whole life, like it would be very difficult for you to like turn against that if that they have provided you comfort and safety. So Aedion and Chaol are up to that. And then Sorscha and Dorian are regularly meeting up in the catacombs, and they are trying to figure out how to dampen Dorian's magic so he's not just exploding all over the place. There are not a lot of books about it, and they're just trying to like do experiments and figure out what is happening. And they know that iron is effective on dampening his magic because in Crown of Midnight he tried to use his magic on an iron door and it like really leached out of him. So they've decided that like maybe having him eat something with iron in it will help dampen it. And so they have him eat this like iron rich, I don't remember what it was, like some tea or something. And then he tries to upset himself so he'll like explode. And obviously he thinks about his friendship with Chaol and also his father. And it seems to work because he does not explode. So yay. And then he's like so excited that he kisses Sorscha, and she's not thrilled about that. And Dorian feels bad immediately, and he's like, oh, maybe I misread the situation. I thought we were really sensing like flirty romantic vibes between the two of us, but maybe not. We're back with the witches, and Manon is talking to Astrid, and Manon turns to Astrid and she says, I want you to keep the 13 busy today. Manon's going to be dealing with Abraxos, and so Astrid's going to be in charge of the 13. And Astrid said, your grandmother said she'd gut me if I let you out of my sight. And Manon says to her, are you my second or her spy? And Astrid says, I serve you. And Manon's like, she's your matron. She's the High Witch. And Astrid says again, I serve you. And Manon thinks to herself that she's done like really nothing to deserve this and earn this loyalty. And once again, we're reminded that witches don't do friendship. But she's starting to have like really friendly feelings towards Astrid because Astrid is so cool. And she also asks Astrid to keep an eye on the yellow legs. And Astrid is like, okay, Manon, I literally already am. I'm way better at this than you are. And so Astrid leaves to go deal with the other 13. And then Manon goes to work with Abraxos. The guys have spent the last 10 minutes trying to put a saddle on Abraxos, and it's not working. Abraxos is just like fighting them and trying to bite them, and they are snapping a whip near him, and he goes to bite another one of them, and they run away. And Manon is like so embarrassed at these men. She's like, oh, these men cannot do anything right. And she grabs for one of them and gets like grabs into him and gets blood on her iron fingernails. And she is shocked because the blood is like gross. Remember, like she would love a taste of man blood, and she gets some and it's disgusting. And it's like curdled and gross. It seems like almost it's like from a dead body, like it's been sitting out for days in a corpse, and it's way darker than it should be for human blood. And she's like, that's super weird. We'll deal with that later. And then approaches Abraxos and turns to him and says, you know who I am. I am Manon Blackbeak, heir to the Blackbeak clan, and you are mine. Do you understand? She says to Abraxos. And Abraxos lowers his head in acknowledgement. She continues, you are Abraxos, Manon said to him, a chill slithering down her neck. I gave you that name because he is the great beast, the serpent who wrapped the world in his coils, and who will devour it at the very end when the three-faced goddess bids him to. You are Abraxos, she repeated, and you are mine. She holds out her hand and he places his head in it. And he's all scarred up from his time as a bait wyvern, from his time he spent in chains. And Manon thinks to herself, they were trophies of a survivor. Abraxos was a warrior who had had all the odds stacked against him and survived. He had learned from it and he had triumphed. Love Abraxos. He's so cute. And Manon turns to the men that were like trying to saddle Abraxos. And she says, leave the saddle and get out. If you use the whip on him again, I will use it on you. Like, we do not whip Abraxos. He is a good boy and he doesn't deserve it. And she starts trying to talk to him, and the guys are like, he does not even understand you. Like, he's a beast. He can't understand. And then ignores him. And she's trying to explain that she needs to put the saddle on him and like check to make sure it will fit. And then she's going to have him fitted with iron spikes. So he has iron spikes so he can be a little iron tooth man, because his original spikes were removed because he was a bait wyvern. So he's going to have cool iron ones, just like her. They're going to be twinsies. And she just like knows he understands. He's like smart, and she's hopeful that he will be able to teach like the other wyverns in the 13 to also be smart and to also like tow, so they can like talk to each other. And then she says to him, once that is done, and you and I are going to learn how to fly, and then we will stain this kingdom red. And it took several days, but they were able to do it, and they're able to like put those iron spikes in, and it was painful, and Abraxos kind of like grumbled and growled about it a lot, but Manon sat with him the whole time telling him stories about riding with the 13 and like her time with the 13 on their brooms. Meanwhile, the rest of the 13 is like training to ride, and they're keeping an eye on the competition. Back with Rowan and Celaena, they're on a field trip. Rowan takes Celaena to visit the commune of healers that live on the border between the magic and mortal lands. While they're there, Celaena needs to shift because a body was found 20 miles away, and they're gonna run there. She's like still like really nervous because she's still not great at shifting, but Rowan like turns to her and says, use your anger. You have a lot of anger in you. Use that as a fuel. You'll find a better fuel eventually, but for now this is gonna work. And so she's able to channel her anger, and they go on a little run. I tried to find a good picture of like the Twilight running, but I feel like you can only really see the Twilight running when it's in video, and so you'll just have to imagine their Twilight running through the forest. And Rowan pinches her and then darts away, and then Rowan tries to grab her again. He's like teasing her, and she grabs him and they start racing, and Celaena wants to go faster. There's like a joy in running. She could die for love of the speed, the surety in her bones. How had she been afraid of this body for so long? Even her soul felt looser, as if it had been locked up, buried, and was only now starting to shake free. Not joy, perhaps not ever, but a glimmer of what she had been before grief had decimated her so thoroughly. Rowan raced beside her, but made no move to grab her. No, Rowan was playing. He threw a glance at her, breathing hard, but evenly. And it might have been the sun through the canopy, because she could have sworn that she saw his eyes alight with a glimmer of that same feral contentment. She could have sworn he was smiling. Okay, gorge, we love brooding boy smiling. So they make it to this small town where another body has been found. And when they get there, no one will talk to them. And Celaena is like, hatches a plot. She's like, I have an idea. Do you have any money, Rowan? And Rowan is like, yeah, but like we've tried that. They're not going to take bribes. Like they aren't going to talk to us. And she says, what if we go shopping and we'll earn their trust with our business? Also, I love shopping, so this is a 2-for-1 deal. And once these people find out that these strangers were here to spend money, the streets begin to fill up with vendors again. Everyone is ready to like talk to them and sell them stuff. And they end up spending the night at a local inn. And that night, Celaena dreams of little baby Aelin, whose mom called her Fireheart. Like that was her mother's nickname for her, was Fireheart. And we hear the story of baby Aelin eavesdropping on her parents when she's supposed to be in bed. And they're talking about how Aelin is banned from the library because she keeps catching the books on fire. Which is particularly sad because her mom says her dearest friends are characters in books. Because she really has no one besides Aedion. She loves Aedion, her cousin, but like she needs more friends. And baby Aedion starts eavesdropping next to her, and the king is like, maybe we should send her away to school, like so she can make some more friends besides just Aedion. And Aedion hates that because they're supposed to stay together, like they're supposed to stick together. He doesn't want Aelin to leave. But then Aelin's parents come out in the hallway and they catch the two of them, and they pull them aside, and they're like, girlie, you cannot keep burning the books in the library. And we know it's an accident, but like we gotta figure something else out. But also we aren't gonna send you away, like you can stay here. And baby Aelin is like, I really hate being different. I'm like, I hate that my magic burns stuff. And her mom says, even if you didn't have powers, you'd still be different. You'd still be a queen someday. And Aelin's like, you know, I'd rather not be the queen. And her mom is like, we'll talk about it in the morning. But they never got the chance to ever talk about it. And that's where we leave them. We go back to the castle, and we are just post-kiss with Dorian and Sorscha. And Sorscha is like trying to grapple with the kiss herself. She realizes that it had just been like a little kiss, but like felt very big. It like had really made her whole world spin. And yeah, it's exciting for her. She's a little bit in love with him, okay? And the iron is working, and so they've decided to put it together like as a tonic that he's taking, and they're pretending it's a contraceptive tonic because like obviously Dorian would need one of those because he supposedly is getting around. That's what they're doing. And Dorian asks her, why are you helping me when it could get you killed? And Sorscha says it's the right thing to do. Dorian says to her, I just want to thank you for seeing me and not running. And they kiss again. It's very cute. But obviously, like, Dorian has some internal damage from Chaol. He feels like Chaol saw him and saw his powers and, like, ran away from him. Even though I don't really feel like that's the truth. Chaol is, in fact, currently working to keep Dorian safe. He's meeting Aedion in an alley. And he is like, okay, dude, I have to leave soon. Like, I have to go to Anel, like, within, like, a month or two. And I need information that's actually gonna help the prince. And Aedion's like, why are you leaving? And Chaol explains the whole situation and the bargain he made to send with his father to send Celaena to Wendlyn. And Aedion says to him, I didn't think that kind of honor still existed in Ardelayne. Okay. Clearly, Aedion sees what I'm seeing. He's like, this man messed up, but he did it with the best of intentions. And Chaol says, what about your dad? This feels like a weird segue, to be honest. Chaol is not great all the way, as always, at segues, okay? And he's like, I have to go hang out with my dad. Do you have a dad? And Aedion's like, I don't know who my dad is. And then Ren comes running at them and is like, men are following us. And so they grab Ren, who is like really drunk, and 6 guys start attacking them. And Aedion turns to the 6 guys and says, none of you are leaving this alley alive. And then he does kill them. And Chaol kind of is like a little bit upset that they killed 6 guys just like in an alleyway. That's like a lot of people dead. And I want to reiterate that this is a reasonable response to violence. Like, Chaol has like a fairly reasonable response to violence. If we recall, in Throne of Glass, that was the first time he like killed a man. You know, he's killing people semi-regularly. And I think it's okay that he's upset about it. Like, maybe, honestly, ideal. And then Aedion's like, okay, we need to hide. There's going to be more men coming for us. So Ren takes them to this opium den. And they have to pretend to be high. And they like pass out on the pillows, pretending to be high. And about an hour... And then some men do come in looking for them, but they pass them by because they're like, those guys aren't it. And about an hour after that, Murtaugh shows up. He tells Chaol the whole story about what magic felt like as it was leaving, that it felt like waves from like spells sent from specific points. And then Chaol decides, he like learns that Ren and Murtaugh have just been like sleeping in the streets, like they haven't actually had a home. And so he decides that he's going to gift them Celaena's apartments. Again, I do believe he's overstepping. I don't think these apartments are his to give out, but he does. He gives them out. Back to Miss Manon. Manon is hanging out with Abraxos. She's trying to feed him a snack, but he's too busy smelling the flowers. He's truly an angel we do not deserve. He does not like the frozen meat that they serve, and honestly, Manon's not a big fan either. So Manon helps him hunt for fresh meat, and they go and they climb up a mountain, and they go get a goat. And at the end of the day, Manon meets up with her grandmother, and her grandmother is like, I want you airborne by tomorrow evening. Don't bother coming back if you aren't. So, like, she needs to figure out Abraxos's wing situation. And so they go up to, the next day, they go up to the top of the mountain. It's a half-day trek, and she's like, okay, Abraxos, time to fly. And he doesn't want to try because it seems scary. He pretends like he can't hear her. And she grabs his face, and she's like, your wings work. They're a little weak, but they work. So you're gonna fly. I've been getting you goats, and if you embarrass me, I'm gonna wear your skin. I'm gonna peel it off of you. I'm gonna wear it. And she jumps on his back, and Abraxos tries to buck her off, but she's like, enough. And then they like tumble down the mountain, they fall off, and they start to fall, and Manon is like yelling for Abraxos to open his wings, and he's like not opening them, and she's like, come on, you have to do it. And then with a war cry that was answered by a piercing shriek as Abraxos flung open his wings, caught up an updraft, and sent them soaring away from the ground, Manon's stomach went from her throat right out her ass, but as they were swooping upwards, his wings were pumping, each boom the most beautiful sound she had ever heard in her long, miserable life. So she's flying, he's flying for the first time, she's flying. Ugh, it's beautiful. We love to see it. The cry that Abraxos let out as they entered that hall of clouds as he leveled out and caught a lightning-fast current, carving a pathway through it. She had not understood what it had been like for him to live his entire life underground, chained and beaten and crippled. Until then, until she had heard the noise of undiluted, unyielding joy, until she echoed it, tipping her head back to the clouds around them. And Manon, because no one was watching, because she did not care, flung out her arms as well and savored the free fall. The wind now a song in her ears, in her shriveled heart. Okay, gorgeous. Abraxos is teaching Manon about joy. And the next day, it is time for the 13 to fly together, and the men that were like training these wyverns are like, you can't fly together, like it's too dangerous. The wyverns are gonna fight each other. And Manon is like, no, like no matter what, the 13 fly together. And so they fly together, and it's really beautiful, and they have a great time. Time to check back in with Celaena and Rowan. Celaena has spent the last week working on lighting a candle without exploding the whole village. Since she's mastered kind of shifting back and forth, Rowan is now working on her controlling her flame. She has like a lot of power, but she has no control. So that's what she's been working on. And that night, Celaena asks Emrys if he knows any stories about Queen Maeve. And Emrys is like, sure, lots of them. What do you want to hear? And Celaena's like, all of them, starting from the earliest ones you know. And Emrys says, okay, we'll start at the beginning. So then we learn about these 3 sisters. We have Mora is known for her cunning. She has the shape of a great hawk. She is Rowan's ancestor. Mab bore the shape of a swan. She's known for like her beauty. And Maeve was Dark Maeve, who could not be contained in any form. Mora and Mab fell in love with human men and gave away their mortalities to be with them. But Maeve never made it, although there were rumors she once loved a warrior, which is why she loves warriors so much now. And so that's kind of the origins. And so Mora and Mab are no longer with us because they died, because they gave up their immortality to be with the men they loved. While Emrys is telling the story, a mountain lion strolls into the kitchen. And no one seems alarmed by this. Celaena's like, there's a mountain lion in here. And it turns out it is not just any mountain lion, it is Gabriel. Gabriel is another part of Maeve's cadre, that group of 6 warriors. And he arrives. He only talks with Rowan for a minute before they both walk off together. And Rowan never came back downstairs. So Celaena's like, he probably wants me to come visit him, probably. AKA, she's really nosy and wants to know what they're doing. So she goes upstairs and she has a bowl of soup that she's giving him. She's like pretending to give him dinner, but also she just wants to know what's happening. And she opens the door and she doesn't knock, apparently. Okay, knock, my friend. And Rowan is tattooing Gabriel when she comes in with stew. And he immediately yells at her and is like, get out, leave the stew. And Celaena does. She is like, immediately realizes that she was not really welcome in that room. And as soon as she's out of the room, Rowan follows her and it was like... And she turns to him and asks, do you do it for money? Like the tattooing? Like, do you have a part-time job? And Rowan is like, no, I would never stoop so low. And Celaena's like, it would be better if you just slap me. And Rowan said, instead of what? And Celaena says, instead of reminding me again and again how rutting, worthless, and awful and cowardly I am, believe me, I can do the job well enough on my own. So just hit me, because I'm damn tired of all these trading insults. And you know what? You didn't even bother to tell me you'd be unavailable. If you'd said something, I never would have come. I'm sorry I did, but you just left me downstairs. Saying those last words made a sharp, quick panic rise up in her, an aching pain that left her throat closing. You left me, she repeated. Maybe it was only out of blind terror at the abyss opening up again around her, but she whispered, I have no one left. No one. Rowan is justifiably like, this seems like a dramatic statement for me literally leaving you downstairs where you are literally every day, but whatever. And he like leaves her alone. Celaena is in a really bad mood the next morning because things left on a terrible note. And when she gets downstairs, Malachi is down there, Emrys' mate, and he's like, look, I got this really cool new knife. And Celaena's like, I don't care. And Luca's like, okay, you do not have to be rude, girly. Like, sorry you're cranky, but, like, be a little bit politer. Celaena says, I do not care about you. She hissed at Emrys and Malachi and Luca. I do not care about your knife. I do not care about your stories or your little kingdom. So leave me alone and keep your goddamn lives to yourselves and leave me alone. And they're once again like, okay, what is Celaena's deal? She's having a rough 24 hours. And so when Rowan comes down later, Emrys is alone in the kitchen. Celaena has left and Luca has left. And Emrys is not looking... particularly happy. He's looking really sad, and Emrys turns to Rowan and says, what are you doing to that girl to make her come in here with such emptiness in her eyes? I see her slipping away bit by bit because you shove her down when she so desperately needs someone to help her back up. And Rowan's like, I don't know why I would be the one to help her back up. Like, she doesn't need me. She needs someone like probably nice. Like, why don't you do it? And Emrys says to him, did you know that Aedion Ashryer was my friend? She spent almost a year working in this kitchen, living here with us, fighting to convince your queen that demi-fae have a place in your realm. She fought for our rights until the very day she departed this kingdom, and many years after that, until she was murdered by those monsters across the sea. So I knew who her daughter was the moment you brought her into this kitchen. All of us who were here 25 years ago recognized her for what she is. It wasn't very often that he was surprised, but Rowan just stared. She has no hope, Prince. She has no hope left in her heart. Help her. If not for her sake, then at least for what she represents. What she could offer all of us, you included. And what is that? He dared ask. Emrys met his gaze unflinchingly as he whispered, a better world. Okay. I'm glad someone had a chat with Rowan, because he has been kind of rude. Celaena has taken her cranky butt outside. She knows she needs a little walk. She needs to walk it off. And she's crying and like sitting under this tree by the water. There was nothing to be done to fix her. She feels like just irrevocably broken. And in the sound of the wind, she hears her mother's voice. Why are you crying? Fight your heart. And Celaena responds, because I am lost and I do not know the way. It was what she had never been able to tell Nehemia, that for 10 years she was unsure how to find the way home, because there was no home left. So sad. My sweet girl. Rowan shows up where she's on the lake after his little talk with Emrys, and he asks if she wants to talk about it, and he says no. And he's like, okay, great. And they head off together, and they're going to someplace new. And Rowan takes her to some caves, and there's this big lake that's been completely iced over, and Luca is chained up on the other side, and the chain is like embedded in the ice. And so Rowan, like we have talked about, Rowan controls air. He also controls temperature, so he has like frozen this lake. And there's this big frozen lake separating Celaena from Luca, and Luca is just like chilling, he's vibing, and he's like, I hope you brought snacks. We love. And Rowan is like, shift and go get him. And Celaena's like, what if I can't do it? And Rowan says, Luca will get wet and maybe die, so like you better get moving. And she starts crossing the ice and can feel her magic flickering inside of her, but she needs to be really careful because her magic is fire and she doesn't want to melt the lake. And she gets over to Luca and is quickly able to melt the ice that Luca is tethered to without hurting Luca or like sending him plunging through into the lake. So she did a really great job, and they're headed back across the ice when Celaena looks through the layer of ice, which is like glass clear, and sees a giant red eyeball staring at her. And she tells Luca to get off the ice as fast as he can, and Rowan suddenly starts to get nervous. He didn't realize that there was a creature in this lake, and he slides her a sword that he like finds on the ledge, and they are able to make it just off the ice as the creature breaks free from the water, and he chases them to the edge of the cave, but he's not able to go any further because the sun, and he's lived in this cave for his entire life, so like the sun is too harsh. And so they race all the way back to Mistward, and when they are finally back and Mistward is visible, she sends Luca ahead, telling him not to share the story of the cave. She's like, maybe we should keep this on the DL. And as soon as he is gone, Celaena punches Rowan in the face and is like, if you ever bring someone else into this again, I will rip your throat out. I will kill you. And Rowan says to her, I will do whatever I want. And Celaena says, you will keep other people out of it. And he says to her, tell me why, Aelin. And she says, because I am sick of it. She was gulping down air, each breath shuddering as the horrific realization she'd been holding at bay since Nehemia's death came loose. I told her I would not help, so she orchestrated her own death because she thought that her death would spur me into action. She thought I could help. I could somehow do more than her, that she was worth more dead, and she lied about everything. She lied to me because I was a coward, and I hate her for it. I hate her for leaving me. She had said it. Said the words that she'd been choking on for weeks and weeks. The rage seeped from her like a wave pulling away from shore. And she let go of his wrists. Please, she panted, not caring what she was begging. Please don't bring anyone else into it. I will do anything you ask of me, but that is my line. Anything else but that. And Rowan asks how she died, and then what happened to the man who killed her. And Celaena says, I killed them both. Like, not Nehemia. I killed both the men that were responsible for her death. I chopped the first one into the pieces, and the second one I gutted. And Rowan says, good, that's what you should have done. And Celaena lets go of where she was holding on to Rowan. She had grabbed him, and she realizes she had not only burned through his clothing, but like burned through his skin, like where the tattoos are like gone. Like she's completely burnt him pretty badly. And she immediately apologizes to him, and Rowan says to her, you do not apologize for defending the people you care about. Gorgeous. We love this. Growth for everyone. And when they get back in the kitchen, Emrys is like, I've never seen their sorry sight. They look pretty bad. He feeds them and tells them to go get cleaned up, and takes Celaena off of kitchen duty for the next couple days. And it turns out Emrys does know a story about the monster in the cave. It's a creature from another land that was maybe let in during the Valg Wars. That night, Celaena can't sleep because she feels so bad about burning Rowan, so she goes to his room and she knocks this time. She's learned her lesson. And he's vibing in his room, shirtless, looking at a map, and Celaena gives him a salve for his burns, and Rowan says to her, I deserved it. And Celaena says, that doesn't mean I can't feel bad. And Rowan says, you have healing magic, you could heal me. And Celaena's like, when I was a child, I wanted to learn how to use it like other healers, but I was never allowed. They said it wouldn't be useful because I didn't have much healing magic, and most queens don't become healers. She's about to leave, and Rowan asks her to come in and shut the door. And he starts to tell her about his past. And he says, when my mate died, it took me a very, very long time to come back. It took her a moment to think of what to say. How long? 203 years and 27 days. He gestured at the tattoo on his face, neck, and arm. This tells the story of how it happened, of the shame I'll carry until my last breath. The warrior who had come the other day had such hollow eyes. Others come to you to have their own grief and shame tattooed onto them. Gabriel lost 3 of his soldiers in an ambush in the southern mountains. They were slaughtered. He survived. For as long as he's been a warrior, he's tattooed himself with the names of those under his command who have fallen. But where the blame lies has little to do with the point of the markings. Rowan tells the story of how he lost his mate, Lyra. He was young when he was mated, and Maeve really disapproved, and so he went off to war to prove himself, and he left Lyra alone at their mountain home because he thought that she would be safe, even though she begged him not to go. And he was gone for several months until he got word that their enemies were not where he was, but instead trying to sneak in through the mountains. And he rushed home as fast as he could, but by the time he got there, their house had already been burnt to ash, and she had been slaughtered, and it turned out she had been pregnant. And he says to Celaena, when you lose a mate, you lose all sense of self, of time, and of place. I handed them down, all the males who hurt her. I took a long while killing them. Had been pregnant since I'd left her, but I had been so enamored with my own foolish agenda that I hadn't sent it on her. I left my pregnant mate alone. And then Celaena asks what he did after that. And Rowan says for 10 years, nothing. He was wandering around barely eating until Queen Maeve found him and commanded he serve her as prince and commander. And then Celaena asks, how do you come back from a loss like that? And Rowan says, I didn't. For a long while, I couldn't. I think I'm still not back, but I might never be, but maybe we could find the way together. And Celaena says, I think I would like that very much. And somewhere far and deep inside of her, an ember began to glow. Beautiful. We love it. And that's the end of part 1. I don't know how long it was. I had to reset my camera like 12 times. It took me like half the afternoon to film that. Part 2 will be coming soon, I'm sure. I don't know what the timeline's gonna look like on this one, because I do think this one's gonna be a little bit longer than part 1 was, but I'm excited to share it with you. The end of this book is so good. The end of this book is so good. Part 1 is like more of the book via pages, but I do think I like almost double the amount of slides for part 2, because I like really want to tell you every single detail. I want to tell you every single detail because the ending of this book is so gorgeous for every single character. Like every single character that we've followed has such an impactful ending that leads so gorgeously into the next book. So I hope you stick around for part 2. Subscribe if you are not already so you know when part 2 is up, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.